space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
All right, Clay, so here we stand at the start of a new stage of our lives where we're going to be talking about 20 episodes of Star Trek, the original series. And the first thing that sort of came to me was, I know we take it for granted, but Star Trek is kind of a weird, awkward title for the show. Do you agree?
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about it before. I mean, when I think it seems that way when you don't use the Star Trek font.
Right. I think of Trek as like a hike.
Yeah.
I was thinking like they would call it like Star Mission or something might have made more sense. It's kind of a weird word.
That's catchy.
Yeah, a weird word that they use. But we're going to be talking about The Cage, which was sort of the lesser known Star Trek pilot. This is the original pilot that they made in 1965. It was directed by Robert Butler, written by Gene Roddenberry. And so right after this, me and Clay, we're going to play a little audio clip from the episode. Me and Clay are going to come back, and we're going to break down the original unaired pilot called The Cage.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to point out that I am the Clay that you know and love, but I am not quite refined in the way that I'm playing myself yet, so I'm going to be a little different than this episode.
Everything's going to be a little bit off. We'll get right into it right after this.
What's been on your mind, Chris? The fight on Rigel 7?
Shouldn't it be? My own Yeoman and 2 others dead, 7 injured.
Was there anything you personally could have done to prevent it?
Oh, I should have smelled trouble when I saw the swords in the armor. Instead of that, I let myself get trapped in that deserted fortress and attacked by one of their warriors.
Chris, you set standards for yourself no one could meet. You treat everyone on board like a human being except yourself. And now you're tired and you...
You bet I'm tired. You bet. I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't, and who lives, and who dies.
I don't think I had ever seen this episode before, all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was one of those ones that before streaming was a thing, was one of those episodes that you hear about, but you didn't, unless you knew someone with a copy of it or something, you would never see it. The only thing I knew of it was I knew that they reused they basically cut it up and made a new episode out of it later in the series.
Yeah, it's basically considered to be like sort of the best clip show episode because they chopped up the pilot and just made it into another episode. Yeah,
which I remember. I remember when I saw the episode they made out of it as a kid. I remember it being pretty cool, and I wanted to learn more about this Christopher Pike fellow because, as I've mentioned before, I am always fascinated by alternate versions and stuff that didn't come to pass and all that kind of stuff. So seeing an episode with a different captain and a different designs and different uniforms and stuff always intrigued me.
This was originally made in 1965. NBC paid for the pilot, and it actually was never broadcast on TV until 1988. Oh, wow. So it was kind of the lost episodes, and like you were saying, the only footage that people had seen from it was in the Menagerie, which is the 2-parter episode that they cut up this episode and put it into. We're settling into a new Star Trek thing. It's like, oh, let's turn on an episode. I'm sure we'll have Bones, we'll have Uhura, we'll have Sulu. We don't get any of them. All we get is Spock and Loxana Troy, a younger version of her. So let's start with the characters here. Mm-hmm. This is a pilot, right? So everything's a little bit off. I think the biggest, the most obvious place to start was with Pike himself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I thought that Pike was very similar to Kirk in a lot of ways, except for one very interesting way, which the episode hints at but doesn't really go anywhere, which he seems to be sort of depressed.
Yeah.
which is really interesting. And Amy thought it was the most interesting aspect of it. And I thought the best scene in the episode is the one where he's drinking with the doctor.
You mean the one where he says, "Drop by my cabin," and then just lays seductively on the bed waiting for the doctor to come in?
And the doctor, and then he feigns surprise that he's like, "Are those ice cubes that you're pouring into my medicine?" He says, "Yes, here you go."
Yeah, I felt the same way. That scene I was really surprised at because the first few minutes of this episode are boring.
Right.
And I looking at it from a historical point of view, you can take a lot of that and kind of sweep it under the rug. But it's the one thing that I'll say overall in this is it's like Star Trek, but like slow Star Trek. Everything about it is a lot slower.
I think I don't think that's unique to this pilot either. It's like we did the Prisoner series, and I think that the Prisoner moves a little bit better, but I think the problem is it's really just writing in the 60s did not split the story into multiple stories going on.
Well, I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about like
just what's going on.
Yeah, the mechanics of what's happening.
Sure.
It's and I guess you could chalk that up to it being a pilot and them having to get through a lot of new ideas.
I don't even think they do that really, though. I don't think they explain much of anything.
Well, I mean, not explanation-wise, but just like, so, for instance, when he calls for the doctor, there's a close-up of him very slowly opening the communicator so you get a really good look at it, and then saying, come to my cabin, and then closing it. And it's very deliberate. And then when they go to the transport, or the first time they transport, it's very slow. They stand in there for like 30 seconds before anything happens.
It's I was laughing too. The first time they go to warp, they show us watching them go to warp. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that was boring. They didn't work that one out yet. But so like the first couple minutes, they're kind of trucking along through this sci-fi dialogue, and nothing's happening. They're literally staring into empty space. And then he goes to his cabin, and he has this conversation with the doctor where he's talking about being depressed and having just come from this battle in which clearly a bunch of people died and more people were injured, and he blames himself. And I was like, holy shit, this is pretty good. I wasn't expecting this at all.
And the doctor has the doctor gives him they basically just kind of drink their troubles away. And the doctor has my favorite line from it. When Pike says, "You're acting more like my doctor than you are my bartender." At this point, the doctor says, "Well, they're pretty much the same. Both of them get two kinds of customers: the living and the dying." It's like, wow, that's it's totally different from what we've sort of grown to used to in TNG, right?
Yeah.
That's much more of a. It's almost like I read that as more like a Western-y kind of line.
Yes, yeah, it's a very Western-y kind of line.
Yeah, and I thought it was really clever. It's different. It makes Pike original, this whole aspect. Of course, it doesn't really carry out into anything. I don't know if they had intended for it to go anywhere in later episodes. It doesn't go anywhere in this episode.
Yeah, I think by the end of it, he's supposed to have this like renewed vigor.
Sure.
But I didn't even really read that by the end. They didn't really lean into that as much as they could have.
Right. I mean, that's
it's like he gets back to the ship and he's like, well, at least I'm not a weird freak who's been put back together by people who don't know what humans look like. I guess it could be a lot worse.
The other thing about Pike that I thought was weird is he's kind of a dick, and mostly a dick to women in this.
Yeah, that was the other thing I thought was that was what I really wanted to talk about here, because as you're saying, none of the crew is the crew that we remember except for Spock. And even Spock is like, it's like draft one of Spock.
Right.
Where Nimoy clearly doesn't know how to play him yet.
Yep.
And the most interesting thing to me was not only that number one was a woman. Actually, the fact that they used the term number one, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Number one was a woman. And Pike is clearly a sexist, and the show, it's not like, oh, well, it was the 60s. They write him specifically that way.
Right.
Because he makes some comment about women not being on the bridge, and then she shoots him a look, and he's like, oh, well, you're one of the good ones or something like that.
Right, yeah, not
and
you.
And then she responds to that, but the way that she responds isn't like, oh, Captain. She responds like, okay. Like, she turns away, like, clearly they're making a comment on what he said.
Right.
Which I thought was arguably to me might be more progressive than what the show became as far as dealing with women on the show.
In that it's like dealing with the fact that there might be people like Pike out there.
Yeah, like I feel like, again, I haven't watched the originals in a long time, so maybe this will change as we get into it, but I feel like the original one got a lot of mileage out of the fact that there were women there at all.
Right.
And this one in the first episode is actively addressing issues.
Right.
Even if just dipping their toe into the water. I was very surprised and kind of impressed with that.
The number one thing is interesting. It's funny to me. He's like, oh, I just can't stand women on the bridge. Although this is also the introduction of something that'll continue for the rest of the original series, where there are characters called the Yeoman, which are always women. They're basically secretaries to the captain.
Yes.
They spend a lot of their screen time bringing food and reports to him. And so it was funny to me that he's very abusive to his yeoman in this episode.
Yeah, he really is.
He's constantly yelling at her, basically for her doing her job. And you're right. Like, she appears and Pike's like, oh, I can't believe there's women on the bridge. And number one has their weird, awkward interaction. The other thing about number one is that when they rewrite and reshoot the pilot, they basically eliminate the number one character and make her personality Spock's personality.
Yes, I noticed that too. She's very, I mean, they even have that, when the aliens are going through their mind, they refer to her as cold and scientific or something like that.
Right, yes.
Even though she still fantasizes about the captain from time to time.
And we'll have to talk about that. The number one, it's Majel Barrett, which is nice. And apparently, when the pilot was rewritten, the Roddenberry had said that one of the studio complaints, the basic complaints, were the studio thought that this pilot was too cerebral and not enough action was going on.
I was thinking the same thing, actually.
And the other thing that they had some issues with the casting. They didn't want to have number one be there. And Roddenberry said in later interviews that it was because the executives were sexist about women being on the show. They didn't think it was appropriate. Mm-hmm. And a producer on the show, Herb Solo or something, later out said, no, that wasn't the case at all. The executives were actually annoyed by the fact that Roddenberry had cast somebody who he was having an affair with in that role without having any auditions for it. So there's all that kind of drama. But the crew is...
I don't know about that. Sounds like a covering your ass excuse, because I mean, I'm sure that shit happens all the time.
I would think so. I would imagine. I could see the studio being more upset that if he didn't consult them about who they were casting. That kind of a thing. The rest of the crew, it's like young Spock who's got all his emotions and he's ready to go. Yeah. Although he doesn't seem to have a role in this. I don't know what his rank or what his sort of position is supposed to be.
I guess he's third in command. I guess he's in the data spot, because when captain's gone and number one goes down, he's the one who takes command of the ship. So I guess. Well,
if you were to watch this episode without knowing what would come after, would you think that he was even sort of an important character in the long run, or is he just you're like, oh, there's a guy with pointy ears?
Yeah, no, he's just there.
He's just there. Yeah.
I mean, like I was saying before, Nimoy doesn't even play him in any sort of unique way. There's one point where they're in their conference room and he's talking about something, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that Spock was from Boston.
Right. Yes, he's got a super strong Boston accent in this one. He's like, we're gonna pack the space vehicle over here. It's the little things that you notice. I like the fact that they have a conference room in the original series. That's nice. They say funny things like they call it a space vehicle, the Enterprise.
Yeah. Yep.
And instead of warp factor 7, they call it time warp factor 7, which is funny to me.
And the way that they pronounce that is weird.
Yeah, they stress it weirdly.
Because I always thought it was warp factor, but it's warp, factor 7.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
It took this episode to get through it. I mean, after number one and Spock are kind of just there. The Yeoman's there. Pike is the interesting one, which we'll get into. I guess this is where the story is going to go. So
go ahead.
I
was just going to say, the one thing I would say, the one word I would use to sum up everything in this show is bland.
Mm-hmm.
The characters are all bland. I don't know if maybe I'm just biased because the original crew is so recognizable at this point.
You mean Kirk, Spock, and McCoy?
Yes,
Yep.
the classic crew. But like everybody who's not Spock in this is just some person who doesn't really have a defined role.
Right.
Oh, I mean, I should say even Spock does, but I just say that because, he's recognizable.
Right.
All the secondary characters have really no defined role. That even the Doctor, he's kind of got a little bit of McCoy, but not really. He's just kind of a guy.
Yeah. Old grump guy, sort of.
And the uniforms too. I didn't realize how much the red added, because there's no red in this.
That's right.
And it's just like it's basically 60s colors. It's like that ochre yellow, that kind of brownish orange.
Yep.
And that like faded blue color. And it really and gray. And it really kind of mutes the palette.
It does, yeah.
Which you'll see a lot again in Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Even in the credits, the title isn't the usual yellow Star Trek. It's just blue and white. It says Star Trek on it. It doesn't have the voiceover or anything like that.
Yep.
And I think that the even on the bridge, there's not like bright colors for the blinking buttons and stuff. It's all very gray and very blue, gray. And it's shot from a sort of 45-degree angle where you're kind of above them, looking down, but not really above them. They'd work out all that kind of stuff.
The phasers are different.
They call them lasers.
Yeah, and they're really boring looking.
Yeah,
there's nothing interesting. It's just like a tube. It's like a flashlight with a handle.
Yeah, yep. They still they still blow up. You can still self-destruct them, which is nice. That's a good callback to everything.
I did notice though, which was kind of fun. Their away uniforms, where they wear those like big gray jackets.
Yeah.
Kind of echoed what the uniforms became much later, because when they had those on, it was the gray with the colored collar.
Right.
Which reminded me of like the insurrection kind of era.
Yes, yeah. I thought that everything felt a much more naval in this one. Like the coats they were wearing kind of reminded me of like naval coats for some reason, like almost a British red coat kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He has like Pike says things like "steady as she goes," things like that. It feels a bit more navally, and the movies will definitely get into this a little bit more and start to doing that. It's obviously all naval because they call them captains and everything, but it felt more obvious in this one. So let's we'll get to the story, which is basically the Enterprise. Which see if you can. We talked earlier about Star Trek, the title. What do you think about the name, the Enterprise, for the ship?
I don't think I've ever thought about it before, because it was just
taken for granted. Yeah. I don't think it's a very good name.
No, I think it's pretty good.
You like it?
I honestly, I can't give you an objective answer about that.
Okay.
Because I just know it too well,
Yes. Yeah. I do have a thing for like the ship names. Like in TNG, we had like Crazy Horse and the Agamemnon and things like that. I like
Pegasus.
The Pegasus. So they're all kind of, the Enterprise just feels sort of like dull to me for some reason. I don't think it's bad or anything, but I've never really thought about it. It's difficult to separate it, like you say. But anyway, the Enterprise responds to a distress call. They go to this planet, and they find the crew that crashed there 18 years ago, and they say, we're going to rescue you. And then, it's a trick. These huge-brained aliens appear, and to capture Pike, bring him down and put him in a cage in basically a zoo. And they're able to read his thoughts and create realities around him, sort of like a proto-holodeck, I guess. And oh man, that would be awesome. Imagine if they did an episode in like Discovery where they had to go in and fix the holodeck, and they cracked it open, and it was like one of those guys just like wired into the ship. Oh, that would be awesome. That's potentially where it's going to go. Pike gets captured. He ends up
that answers a lot of questions.
He ends up fighting back against these guys. He finds another woman who is the other human, and apparently they want the aliens want these two to mate and have children and become a slave race for them. And then Spock and the others try to rescue him. They don't rescue him. Pike gets out of there by saying, we don't want to be captives, and the aliens agree. And then they go back to the ship, and that's the end of the episode.
That ending probably could have had another rewrite done to it, I think.
I think that my takeaway from the story here was that, I was disappointed that the Pike's state of mind never came back into it. And B, that I couldn't really tell you what the theme of this episode is. There's a lot of sort of different there's a lot of different angles that they take on it. Like, are they talking about like is reality, like is the illusion supposed to be better than reality? Is like a Matrix type thing? Is it supposed to be that the violence of humanity is ironically what saves them? Is it supposed to be that like beauty is more important than anything else in this world, and it's not worth going home if you can't be pretty?
That's what I've always said.
What did you think about this sort of story here?
I don't know. I think I was having trouble pinning that down as well, because there's no point where Pike is considering staying, and I think that's the point that's missing from, like, he sees
through the mystery immediately.
Yeah, he sees through it immediately, and there's nothing that they do that even convinces him, like, at all that he might want to stay.
Right.
Like they throw everything at him, and he's completely defiant of it, which, having set him up earlier in the show as being someone who's tired of this and just wants to go and relax, to not even have him falter a bit is kind of surprising.
That's true.
You could chalk that up to just the time, maybe, in that the hero of your show, I don't know, maybe it wasn't cool to have the hero of your show be wimpy like that. Not that it is wimpy, but it's better storytelling if you make him falter. But I could see why maybe they would be like, well, we can't have him actually want to leave the ship and desert everybody.
Right. But at that point, why keep that early scene in the episode?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's another reason why that surprised me so much, is because I was like, wow, this is the first episode, and you're establishing your captain is kind of over it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the most surprising thing. He's never tempted. I was surprised that they didn't play it as more of a mystery as to him not realizing like they reveal the aliens immediately to you. They even do something where I don't think TNG ever did this, where you see the crew through the perspective of the aliens for a little bit. Like they see them on the view screen, and they're being spied on. I don't think TNG ever did that, which is interesting.
The thing that they did do that I kind of liked, but yeah, I guess they did it pretty well, is the thing about how, well, first of all, these aliens are incredibly superpowered. Like the fact that they can affect the Enterprise from underneath the surface of the planet that they're on that's some immense power.
Right. Yeah. The Telosians, I think, is what they're called. Just FYI. Yeah.
What is it?
I think they're called the Telosians.
Telosians?
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Big brains.
The idea that they kind of get into a thing that almost could have been its own plot, which is that outside of the menagerie, so to speak, they affect everybody else, what everybody else can see, so you have no idea if what you're seeing is what's happening.
Right.
But like not on the scale that they do with Pike, where he's back in the Mojave Desert, which is now a bustling community apparently.
With Tango, his horse.
But it's more like they're trying to blast in through the door of this thing, but nothing's happening. But then they're like, well, maybe we did blast through it. We don't know. They could just be blocking our minds.
Yes.
And that stuff was kind of interesting, but they didn't really do a lot with it.
No, I like the fact that they actually had shot a hole in the wall, and they
oh my god,
they just
that was
covered
hilarious
it with a mental image.
That's real fucking dangerous. These guns just don't work. Look, I could point it right at your face and pull the trigger, and nothing happens.
The batteries are out. Yeah, they were lucky. They immediately gave up on they didn't try to like bang it like it was an old TV or anything. They just gave up. They're like, these guns are no good. Did you think that? So NBC called the pilot too cerebral, and you said you kind of agreed with that. Do you want to like expound on why you think that?
Well, I was surprised by it, because there's some really interesting stuff going on, and I thought it was a pretty good episode overall. Like the stuff that they raised with the aliens and that kind of stuff was interesting to me, because I was expecting something more action based.
Right.
I was expecting there to be more of an emphasis on the action, given the time period in which the show was made. So to have it be, the aliens are kind of don't really do anything. They do a lot of talking.
Yes.
And the ship doesn't really do anything. They just sort of sit around, do a lot of talking. And
yeah, the Enterprise is pretty ineffective in this. They don't really do anything. They get that huge phaser which they shoot at the rock thing, and it doesn't work, but they don't really do anything outside of that, and then they get thrown into sort of chaos, and they beam down eventually number one and the Yeoman,
which was my favorite part of the episode, after somehow the Telosians screw up the transporter beam and only beam down the Yeoman and number one, and then Spock yells, "The women!"
They took our women folk. Put your yeah, go ahead.
Oh, but yeah, it's just like it's not really showing off the goods, really. It's just sort of like a talky sci-fi thing, and even they try to get a little bit crazy by having all these different fantasy realms or whatever, but it's not really, you're not really getting a good sense of what the show is about.
No, you know what I was actually the most well, actually I'll do this afterwards, but I would say that, like, if I was reading NBC calling this too cerebral, I almost feel like if I was there and I was an executive, that would be my polite way of saying this is too boring a little bit. Like, I don't even think it's, I would say it would be more cerebral if I could understand what the sort of point of this all was. There doesn't seem to me to be any kind of intellectual point that they're talking about.
It seems like they're bringing up a lot of different things, but they're not really focusing in on any one of them.
Right, and I'm not sure, like, so the Telosians are doing this because they basically want to breed a slave race that what, has an imagination? Is that what they're trying to do?
I guess.
They say they want, like, engineers and artists at the very end, but I don't understand why.
I think they want to breed a race that will rebuild all their shit.
Okay, and they can't do it because they're too in their own heads about stuff?
Maybe I found it so interesting because I was reading into it 40, 50 years on, and I was like, this is actually kind of an interesting look into what the future became as far as, like, media is concerned, but I could be reading too much into it.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel that those aliens, and the other thing that was kind of funny is to me, it kind of flips in this funny way. I mentioned it before about how violence, the human sort of flaws are the reason that they are allowed to escape. Because the aliens are like, well, you guys are too fucked up, and you won't just be happy in this paradise that we've made for you, so therefore we just have to get rid of you.
For a show whose stated philosophy later on became peace on Earth and the unification of man to explore the stars, your first episode starts with your captain solving the problem through sheer hatred.
Yes.
Focusing his mind on nothing but rage and hate is what solves the problem for him.
And the woman is like, you can't be mad for what, more than a minute or two. Puck's like, I'll fucking show you, and just strangling the aliens.
Now that I'm thinking about it, these aliens are kind of like a proto-Q a little bit, aren't they?
This is going to be recurring. The original series takes a lot of flack for running into basically godlike creatures more often.
Okay, yeah.
And I think this is sort of the first hint of that, although they're gods that you could. Q would never let you actually strangle him. These aliens can be strangled, which is interesting.
And Q does not also have a backwards dancing chicken monster.
Right. And they actually, the thing with the Telosians, they do the same thing that they did with the Binars in TNG. They're all played by women, but with male voiceovers.
Oh, yeah.
Or, yes, I think that's right, yes. Because
ain't nothing weirder than that.
No, that's the most bizarre thing possible. You know what I was actually really impressed by? The set design. I thought the planet looked really cool. I thought the planet looked more alien and more cool than anything we'd seen in Next Generation. And I even sort of liked the weird fake Mojave area that he goes to.
Oh, man. I loved the, was it Rigel 7?
Yes.
Or whatever.
Yep.
That first shot of the castle looked like a...
Give me a Highlander 2 vibe.
Yeah. Well, no, it reminded me of like an old sci-fi book cover, like a Frank Frazetta painting of John Carter on Mars or something.
Yes, like that. Everything's a little washed out and sort of lightly colored. Yeah, that's true.
And I noticed that so far they've established that alien means either weird and dystopic or barbaric and Middle Eastern.
Right. Yes, we got to draw on all. We got to draw on all things. When he's fighting that guy.
You mean when he's doing the gratuitous ass beating?
Yes, when he's giving a gratuitous ass beating. Did that actually happen to him in the past? Is that what he was saying?
It was supposed to be him, a vision of...
He had been to that planet before.
So I think that was supposed to be him back on the planet they had just come from that gave him all of those thoughts about depression and wanting to leave, that battle they just came from. I think that was supposed to be there.
Okay.
But they could only afford one guy, I guess.
Right, yeah, it wasn't much of a battle.
Yeah, it was just like the aftermath of it. So, but yeah, like even there, it wasn't... If that's what they were doing, they probably should have made that a little clearer and made it a little bit more. Well, first of all, why would you send, if you're trying to convince a guy to stay somewhere, why would you send him back to that shit?
Right.
But yeah, I think they probably could have leaned into that more to connect those dots a little better.
Yeah. I think we're pretty much on the same page with the sort of weakness of the point of this. Let's see here, like the aliens themselves, it comes to this sort of ending where everything just gets kind of wrapped up. They agree that the woman Vina, or whatever her name is, that she's going to stay with an image of Pike. I feel that, like you said, I feel the ending needed another pass here. I don't think this is particularly very strong. It kind of wraps everything up in this half satisfying, half dissatisfying way, and Pike himself doesn't really come up with the solution besides just being human, which is apparently unacceptable to these aliens.
Right. The only solution he comes up with is we're just going to blow each other up.
Right. I'll see you all in hell. Yeah. And the aliens at that point are unable to do any sort of fantasy on people that would stop them from blowing each other up. And they didn't even really tie into the fact that all the women went down and were supposed to tempt him or anything like that. The way that they handled that stuff here was really weird, because it was strange to have you're clearly calling out Pike as being sort of sexist and establishing number one as being, a fairly strong female character, to use a phrase. And then you zap them down in there, and her and the Yeoman they're both like, we've read both of their thoughts, and they both want to bone you. Yes, yeah. Pike handled it like Pike didn't even flinch.
Yeah, it's like continuing this tradition of no matter what the character is like, if you're female, you have to get all in a tizzy around the captain.
Right, yeah.
And it's very, very odd.
And I think they would have, I could see that plot happening with the Kirk thing, but I think the Kirk character would kind of play off those moments with a little bit more of like a sort of twinkle in his eye. Pike plays it very, or the Pike character treats it as very non-important almost. And I get,
it's like this again.
I get the fact. Yeah, I get the fact that working for Pike is not particularly a pleasant experience, which is interesting for like this 60s sci-fi, the ship blasting off into space kind of thing.
Yeah. He's not really horribly sympathetic when you really break it down.
No, I don't think he has a single moment with anybody. Where he's like. Where he shares like a sly smile or like says some kind of joke to another crew member or anything.
Yeah, the lightest he gets really is with the
doctor.
The doctor there.
Yeah.
Oh, who I loved later on in the episode knows a shitload about those aliens based entirely on assumptions. Like, they have no evidence of anything that happened, and then the doctor's like, well, clearly these aliens can contact each other through telekinesis, right, and also have the power to create really absolute realistic visions that we can't tell what is real and what is fake. And Spock's like, yeah, that's clearly what it is.
I'll write that down in the report, which is still loose leaf paper at this point, which I appreciate that they have to flip through. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it, and then they just blast off into space. He says engage, and they fly off. And we are not going to see Pike again for a very, very long time.
And when you do, he's kind of the worse for wear.
Yep, he hasn't really handled his changes. You know what the surprising thing to me is that the Enterprise has been around for a long time, is what this episode hints at. It's not like TNG, which is Picard gets a brand new ship.
Mm-hmm.
The Enterprise has been around, and we're going to learn this. This takes place 13 years before the Menagerie, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a long time. And apparently Spock has been on the Enterprise for 13 years.
Some say he's never left.
He's still there to this day. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the...
what you were talking about the Enterprise before, and the name and whatnot, but what do you think about the design? I feel like we should look at the design here, because that's another thing that's easy to just sort of like, yeah, well, clearly that's the Enterprise.
Right. What do I think about it? I think it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think its form makes more sense in like Next Generation. I don't know if the original series ever goes over what the difference is between the sections of the ship.
Yeah.
Like what the saucer is used for.
Mm-hmm.
In Next Generation, the saucer makes sense. It's kind of like the living area, the escape. Like everyone lives in the saucer, and it's kind of the like lifeboat if things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They can't do that in TOS, and I think it's good. It's very... I like the angularness of it, as opposed to, I guess people when they were shooting TNG had a problem with that ship design because it doesn't shoot very well.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
So what did you think?
I think it's not bad. I think it's interesting that it seems to me almost like the first design was just a flying saucer, and then someone was like, well, we can't put him in a flying saucer. That's ridiculous.
Right.
We got to put some legs on it.
Yeah, on a skinny neck.
But it works because I think it works because it takes up a good amount of space, but it isn't bulky.
Right.
So it reads pretty well on TV without it just coming across like a big blob or anything.
You can see the stars behind it and stuff as it's moving around. Yeah.
I think aesthetically it might not be the best design, but I think it works for what they were using it for.
Right. And I think that it's I do like...
And the other thing that I found is I personally like the bigger separation between the saucer section and the body.
Yeah.
I don't know if, again, that's just a traditional thing, but, when they get to, like, First Contact, or even Voyager ship is kind of cool, but when they get to First Contact and you get the Enterprise E that's a lot more streamlined and, like, tighter, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't really... I don't like it as much as the one with the giraffe kind of neck on it.
Right, yeah. I think I agree with that too, where they basically just sort of smooth all the ships down. It's being sort of a line, like a very streamlined kind of image to them, and they don't have this sectionality to them, I guess, which is nice. And also you're in space, it doesn't matter what you're shaped. You don't need to be aerodynamic, I guess, if there's no air going around you.
Right, right.
But I think the ship is good. I do wonder if we're going to learn more about how the ship is actually designed in TOS, like what the difference is. I guess the only thing we've learned is that the opening to this one, the cage, the bridge is definitely on top. They do that sort of cutaway function where they show you the people are sitting here. You can see inside the little ant cage and look at them.
Honestly, I'm really glad that they did that, because I think it took me probably 15 years before I figured out where the hell they were actually sitting on that ship.
Right.
Because it's not really intuitive.
No. I'm just trying to think of the earliest, it always happens in the movies because the bridge gets blown up and you can see out where they're looking. It happens in Nemesis. I think it happens in Wrath of Khan, if I'm not mistaken. So it's that kind of a thing where you can be like, oh, that's where they are. I can see that they shot right there and that's what they're looking out at. I think that's anything else we should talk about before we just for like opening Enterprise. We're going to have more to talk about once we settle into Kirk and stuff, I would assume. So everything here it feels very like incidental, if anything. And I think that, I'm glad they went with a little bit of a different arc on the captain, which we'll get to. Pike is fine. Like, I don't know where they would have taken him from here. Would they have continued his little depressed angle, or would they have done anything like that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough, because I mean, I think in order for that angle to really work, you have to have another character who is not that.
Right.
And otherwise you end up with Batman versus Superman, and nobody wants that.
I guess that would be the Doctor's role, right? That seems to be the the doctor in this one.
Yeah, but even he was kind of like,
he's over it as well.
Right? Yeah, he's like, he's a little bit more positive, but he's still that kind of positive where it's like, well, I mean, you should just do whatever you want because you're probably going to die soon.
Right.
It's not super positive. It's still, kind of cynical, but a little more humorous.
Right. I think that character is actually fairly bonesy. I think he's fairly similar to McCoy in a lot of ways. He's maybe not as angry. He seems a little bit more worn out by it, but
yeah.
I think that's probably just the way everything seems a little bit worn out. Is that our takeaway? The pilot seems like the ship and all the characters on this one have just had enough of everything, and they don't really care about what's going on.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And when you say it like that, that's a really bold take for a pilot show.
That's true. Let's go.
Unless it's join us on our 5-year mission and how we figure out to be excited by space again.
Right. Yeah. The opening credits would have been like, we just finished a 5-year mission. Join us as we start another one right after this. Let's go to our final thoughts and ratings about The Cage. I'm going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay will be right back with our thoughts.
Can you hear me? My name is Christopher Pike, commander of the Space Vehicle Enterprise from a stellar group at the other end of this galaxy. Our intentions are peaceful. Can you understand me?
It appears, Magistrate, that the intelligence of the specimen is shockingly limited.
This is no surprise, since his vessel was baited here so easily with a simulated message. As you can read in its thoughts, it is only now beginning to suspect that the survivors and encampment were a simple illusion we placed in their minds.
You're not speaking, yet I can hear you.
You will note the confusion as it reads our thought transmissions.
All right, then, telepathy. You can read my mind, I can read yours. Now, unless you want my ship to consider capturing me an unfriendly act...
You'll now see the primitive fear-threat reaction.
That's it. That's the unaired pilot for TOS, which is interesting. I'm looking forward to... I know we're not doing the entire TOS series. I do appreciate the difference in tone of the shows. Uh-huh. Like, they're just very, very... They're written very, very differently.
Yeah, I found it slightly... As slow as it was at points, I found it kind of refreshing from the TNG formula.
Right. Yeah. And it always, the original series always kind of strikes me more as like Twilight Zone-y.
Yeah, it definitely had a Twilight Zone vibe to it, which I was thinking about that because I was thinking about how it was a more cerebral, kind of boring episode, but I was trying to think, it's no more boring than a lot of it's no more cerebral than what the Twilight Zone was doing, but I guess the Twilight Zone was usually a half an hour show, so they probably moved a little quicker.
Oh, were they half hour?
Yeah, they were. Okay. I think there was 5 seasons, and I think seasons 1, 2, 3, and 5 were all half an hour. They went to an hour for season 4, and I don't think it went very well.
Yeah, okay. That would definitely pick up the pace a little bit more. I always think that they're, because even if the Twilight Zones are half hour, I still sometimes, if I just watch a random Twilight Zone, I still feel that it drags until it gets to like the idea of what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think the other problem you have with shows like this, especially in this time, is that unless you get actors who are really, like good character actors, a lot of these 60s TV actors are fucking awful.
Right, yeah.
And they're just, in this episode, if you look at 90% of everybody on screen, it's even like we said, even Nimoy is kind of boring.
Yes.
Like, he's not really making any choices or anything. I after this episode was over, it auto-played the next one, which was the first Classic Crew episode, and I just watched, like, the first 5 minutes. And
was it Mantrap that it went to? Okay, yeah.
It immediately feels different.
We are gonna, I guess we should talk about this because Mantrap was produced much later. So the way that what you're saying makes sense. But what we're gonna do is the next episode we're gonna watch is Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is the pilot that was shot with Kirk. And I think you'll have a different opinion when you see Where No Man Has Gone Before. But if we watch them in the order that it aired, you would probably say, why does this episode look so much different in episode 6? Like, why is everything different?
That makes more sense because the other thing I was thinking was, wow, they made a lot of changes. This is way different. And they're starting with focusing on bones?
Right.
That's really bold.
I actually like Mantrap. I think Mantrap's a really good episode, so we're going to be doing that one as well. But that is... what you're saying will hold up and will be a little bit different. So the way that we're going to do this is we did the cage. We're going to do Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is the second pilot with Kirk. And then we're going to do the Corbinite Maneuver, which is the first regular episode of the series. And then we'll go into everything else. So let's wrap up, talk about the cage. I guess we'll stick to our normal 1 to 5 thing just because YouTube lets us vote with 1 to 5s. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 is absolute trash. You wouldn't want to watch again. 2 is an okay episode with some problems that hold it back. 3 is the average episode. 4 is where you show it to somebody who'd never seen Star Trek before, and 5 is an all-time classic. I'm going to give this one a 2. I think it's fine. I'm sort of more excited by it just by the fact that it was different, and it's not the sort of usual TNG stuff that we've been seeing, and there's a lot of different angles to take with it because of how different it is. But I don't think the story holds together. The strongest aspect is Pike, and they don't really do anything with him. And the fact that it makes me a little bit uncomfortable to see Spock sort of running around yelling about stuff. Yeah. And to see that he needs to have his eyebrows combed a little bit more.
And get his hair in place.
Yeah, get his hair in order, everything like that. What'd you think on the scale of 1 to 5, sort of general thoughts?
I think as an interesting relic or alternative telling of Star Trek, I would that bumps it up to a 3 for me, just because I find that stuff interesting.
Yeah. But
if I'm going purely on the episode itself, I would also probably give it a 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. But I think a lot of it might be amplified. The interesting nature might be amplified by the fact that it's so different than what I was expecting.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, the story is kind of and it doesn't really. I mean, it's a really interesting choice for a pilot, but I don't know if I necessarily think it's a good choice for a pilot.
Right. Yeah. Apparently, that was the general consensus too. There were like 4 different ideas for what they wanted to do for a pilot.
If it were me, if I were to pick an episode of TOS, obviously because it's my favorite one and I think it's the best one, I would have. If you go with like Balance of Terror as the pilot of your show, that's a home run.
Yep.
Because I mean, you get everything you get all the Star Trek stuff in that one episode.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you, I like for a pilot, their sort of general mission doesn't even really come across in this.
Well, you can. I mean, if you just look at the what they end up doing is they tack on the captain's log. Well, not the captain's log. Well, even that they do tack that on, but. The space, the Final Frontier 5-year mission thing. It's like, well, what the hell are they doing out here? They don't. You don't even know at this point.
Because when we open on this one, they're flying into some kind of space thing that no one knows what it is, and it's like, what's their general purpose out here? They also have a funny line about Earth is on the other side of the galaxy or something like that, which makes it seem much more drastic that they're farther away or something like that. But
they have. They don't make any mention of Starfleet, but they have some sort of like passing mention of some sort of group, I think.
Yes, they don't call it the Federation or something. They call it like a space group or something that they're a part of. It's like that.
I'll be back later. I'm going to space group.
That needed another pass, I think. Yeah, that's it for the cage. Well, I guess once this is done, we can just forget about this because this doesn't really end up going anywhere. But it'll be interesting to see what we think about the difference between this and Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Are you planning on doing the menagerie as well?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think it's necessary. If people want, let me know in the comments if you want to see it. But I don't think so. I don't think it's particularly necessary to going forward. But that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Clay, thank you very much again.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, we're back for a smattering.
Another 5-year mission.
A smattering of TOS. We'll go through TOS much faster than anything else. So that'll be good. It's only about 20 episodes of it. And guys, thank you very much for listening. If you're on YouTube, like and the comments, appreciate it. iTunes, a rating and review helps us get the show out there. Any podcatcher that has a rating system, we'd appreciate you rating the show. You can go to facebook.com/the Pensky Podcast. You go to patreon.com/the Pensky Podcast to support the show couple dollars a month gets you extra content. We talk about movies and things like that that aren't always Star Trek related, but there you go. And there you have it. You can check it out at Patreon. And yeah, that's it. We're going to be back with Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is the introduction to Kirk and pretty much everyone else who's kind of usual on the show, I believe. Maybe I'm getting confused, but that'll be the case. Anyway, let's see here. Anything else to run through? Clay, you have anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I was really happy that the theme song was intact, because that seems to be it's a great theme song, and that holds the show together pretty well.
It does. It's like I feel like the theme song really hits the era of the 60s. Like, there's something so 60s about this theme.
That like high-pitched voice.
Yeah, with sort of like with like percussion kind of going on, and like sort of a beatnik percussion kind of thing going on in the background. Yeah, it's cool. And we're going to be back to the original introduction shortly with No Man, I think. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.